Welcome back to another webinar and discussion with the Educating All Learners Alliance. We're really happy for this webinar and conversation that we're having today. We have some special guests. First, my name is Gabrielle. Hello, I'm with the Educating All Learners Alliance team as a marketing and communications manager. But more importantly, our special guests today on the panel, who you can see on screen, are Alan Pratt, who's the executive director at the National Rural Education Association, and then actually one of my colleagues at the organization InnovateEDU, Sabrina Baptiste, who is the programs operations director for the teaching fellowship that we have. So today we're going to be discussing the idea of micro schools, and more specifically the sort of comparison of micro schools in urban settings and how that is conducted versus the more traditional and rural way that small schools and micro schools have happened throughout history. So I wanted to give each of you a chance to introduce yourself, and could you share a little bit of how the idea of micro schools is executed in the setting that you work in? I'll start with Alan.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invitation to record and be a part and kind of share some of our work, but also really just talk in general about really the rural school movement, but small schools, and then how that is, I'm going to say this and hope I don't offend anyone, it's kind of replicated or copied in a, say, more of a private school situation. So they took our idea and ran with it, kinda. Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. Our organization's in all 50 states, so we have 46 state affiliates, and we cover schools that are one-room schoolhouses, which we consider the original micro schools, and larger school districts as well across the country. So that's what we are doing currently. And then this is kind of a new area for us. And it really came about before COVID, but COVID's really opened the innovation and kind of revamping of how we educate children. So golden opportunity to make some changes.
And then we'll go to Sabrina.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. So thank you. Smart group instruction in our setting is a little different from Alan's. We kind of do small group instruction in a circle kind of setting, so where students and their small group instructor just kind of meet, and we are kind of just closing learning gaps. So we found that learning gaps are present in our school, and of course COVID has widened those gaps. So small group instruction will actively allow us to meet our students where they are and allow them to work against their goals. So we also root this in data. And data for our small group instruction is kind of tracked through classwork and testing assessments. And then after analyzing data, our small group instruction teachers and the Brooklyn Lab Charter School teachers plan specific lessons to address these learning targets. So this is a great way for our students to, again, learn against their goals, achieve any learning gaps that we have, and to also just help them become a well-rounded student.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to see how it can be conducted, depending on where a student lives, from that, more traditional one schoolhouse, like you said, to in an urban setting, maybe it's just a breakout portion of their school day and not their entire school day, like in Sabrina's setting. And I wanted to just introduce to those viewing how this idea even came about, because some people might see recent news articles about the topic of microschooling. And actually, this topic was brought to be from Alan being featured in an article. So I just wanted to mention for anyone interested, on IdahoEdNews.org, Alan was featured in an article titled "Microschools Have Popped Up in Idaho, but in Unknown Numbers." And so it kind of talks about exactly what we're talking about here. But I wanted to dive in a little bit more to on the rural side of things. Alan, within the article, it shares a statement: micro schools are the definition of what rural schools can be and what rural schools are currently like in a lot of places. And so since the actual definition of micro schools isn't truly defined, how do you sort of think through that statement?
I'll kind of define a little bit from a lot of different groups and different news articles. NPR did an article, I want to say 2015, describing the return of the one-room schoolhouse. And that kind of, sparked my interest in reading through this, probably 2016, 2017. And when I went to Idaho, kind of post-pandemic, I saw there were some micro schools popping up, and the definition basically looked at blended age learning, flexible schedules, multi-grade, obviously in one building or one area, and small size. So I started comparing that to, well, if you look at a one-room schoolhouse, you have multiple grade, multiple age, usually one teacher, usually project-based learning, usually a lot of multi-tier connection with personalized learning as well, with the more one-on-one time with the teacher. And I'm like, a lot of places are doing similar aspects of this micro schooling. They're not calling it micro schooling, but they're doing this already. And then if you look at the future of what we learned in the pandemic, what we're learning now, still carrying forward, personalized learning, blended learning, that aspect of multi-grade where some of the older students can help the younger students, but your innovative approaches working together, helping each other, tutoring or mentoring in so many cases. Why don't we do more of it? Public schools, they can take this model and make it work within a, say school within a school, or a pod within a school, or a micro school within a school. So why are we not doing more of that if we know there's success in one-room schools, and obviously the pods or micro schools are being very successful and people are kind of trending towards those ways? Why not do it? And why not make it better for all of our students? So.
Exactly. And our team was recently discussing, news around microschooling popping up more prominently in Arizona. And there's a group of mothers that are putting together, I believe it's over 50 micro schools in their area. And they're seeing how it's really supporting the SEL for students. So I'd love to jump to Sabrina, because I know in your setting, it's an urban public charter school. And it's primarily small groups with one, teacher of the group, and then one grade level within that group, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love to, maybe if you could discuss how that program is, set up to promote students' overall improvement in school, especially since I know that, the school that you're supporting works with a lot of students with disabilities.
Yes. I think small group instruction is just especially beneficial for special populations of students. So like we talked about, students, English language learners, special education students, at-risk students, and even students of poverty, or students that just need a little special attention that they can't get during whole class instruction. I think with the small group instruction implementation, the learning is scaffolded by using like visuals, graphic organizers, supplemental aid, note-taking assistance. Like students are learning how to annotate when they're reading, or really honing into learning how to do their math problems. So we're offering reading supports. And also, given that we're a huge tech school, like technology is also being used during small group instruction, which is great. So kids are learning not only how to use their tech to help fundament their learning, but just also learning how to use it in a general sense. So that gives them some sense of responsibility. And I think even further than that, like we're just thinking about bringing on like manipulatives in the classroom and small group instruction. So I think just small group instruction overall just allows for students and their learning to be a targeted initiative. And it's definitely something that I would love to see in more schools.
That's good. Yeah, especially the targeted focus, as many schools may be challenged to address things, like individualized learning plans and just that more individualized aspect of learning in general. I like that aspect of the targeted focus. Now, I would open the question to both of you. What, if any, risks might there be with a micro schooling or, like a small group instruction setup?
For me, there's a risk because when you talk about micro schools, it automatically goes to private schools. And people are thinking, well, is he supporting the private school or the vouchers or something? It's not that. It's the fact of, why not do something differently to make things work for all students? And I think Sabrina hit it right on. Talked about, well, it's small group instruction, yeah, but a lot of times when we talk about, oh, we have to be more personalized, we have to do this, we get in those lanes of, oh, it's only going to be sixth graders that are doing that, or it's only going to be fourth graders. Why can't it be third, fourth, fifth, and sixth together, and they're helping each other out? And I think that's where we talk about innovation or just simple changes that will really impact and reach a child. I know I have a son that's in sophomore in high school. When he was in elementary school, they introduced kind of older students coming down from the high school or in the same school and really working together on issues. And it ended up being kind of a social connection, but it also ended up allowing students, like Sabrina talked about, that just may have a different background that just need a little extra time on some stuff. And it made them feel like, hey, somebody is listening or trying to reach out. It's not always about the ABCs and the math. Sometimes it's about that social connection, about being a part of a school, which is vital, I think. So it's a long answer, I know, but I think that's the best way to put it.
I can definitely attest to what Alan is saying. I think a challenge that just may arise at just seeing it actually in person, and it has happened, is that you do have a variety of students at different learning levels, and I think we do have just a range of different deficits of learning as well. So we may have low reading comprehension to computation problems, and then I think we already know that the older the student, the more significant the achievement gap may be, and the disruption that COVID has caused in education. So I think that differentiating for students may also be a little tricky for instructors if they're not familiar with individualizing a lesson for a student. So I think that definitely just gives a lot of onus to the educator here to make sure that they're able to serve these students in any age gap or learning level that they're at, and just being able to meet them where they are.
That's a good point. And I think Alan kind of touched on, that same point where maybe some gaps of the teacher's own skill set might be filled by other students coming in and, sharing a new perspective. Maybe it's an older student to a younger student, or even vice versa. As adults, we often find that children teach us things. So it could be the same for an elementary school and a high school student. I think that's really interesting. So you kind of touched on, the aspect of COVID and how that might impact micro school settings. So I'm kind of interested to hear from both of you if there were any sort of practices started within your own personal experience with micro school settings, any practices started during COVID that you think will continue, onwards in the future.
I think for us, we have really just learned to use small group instruction to build students' confidence. So students who haven't had much success in school will often lack participation in whole group discussions and things like that. And even though they may know the answer to the question that you're asking, they still may be reluctant to participate. And I think through small group instruction, we've allowed those students to have a voice. And we've also implemented success coaching, is where we have our instructors actually meet one-on-one with their students and get to know them, get to know their personal lives, get to have conversations with them, which helps the student feel a lot more confident, not only in their schoolwork, but on their day-to-day as a growing human being.
I think Sabrina brought up a good point in the fact of this personal relationship with the teacher, instructor, and getting more one-on-one time. And I think that's a big part of it. I think also look at, and I want to say this may be a little bit different for folks, but who says we have to go to school 5 days a week? Is there not flexibility? When you're looking at high school students or even middle school, elementary, I would say yes more, but you're looking at the 4-day week is very popular in a lot of rural areas, where that Friday's an in-service day or some kind of training day or a catch-up day. But there's a lot of different ways we can educate children. The 5-day brick and mortar building doesn't meet the needs of every student. We know that. I mean, going into it, there's students that just can't function properly in that environment. So why not be open to a virtual, a hybrid, more of a blended learning where it's synchronous and asynchronous learning, and build in time that we can do the catch up or the extras that we need for students that may need that time. But if students are not needing the catch up, why not let them sail, move forward, and do some things that really pique their interest in a career or some environment that they want to be in? That's my take on coming out of COVID. We have the unbelievable opportunity to change what we do public ed. I will say, with a little bit of an asterisk, if we don't, we're going to probably have some alternatives that we may not be comfortable with. And especially for rural schools, we can't lose students, we can't lose teachers. So this is our chance to be kind of flexible outside the box.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think a lot of schools implement certain aspects of what you were saying with things like early release days, but it may not be as flexible as hybrid days. But I think a lot of schools are, thinking through some of the ideas that you mentioned, because like you said, with many teachers leaving the field of teaching right now, especially in rural schools, it's just, not something that can happen. Students need educators. So it's definitely something good to think about. I guess you kind of touched on it in that point, but would either of you say there's anything, I asked what you're going to keep from COVID. Is there anything you would maybe leave behind that happened pre-COVID that you think won't continue in small group instruction?
I think to follow this like rigor mortar 5-day, school week kind of situation, I think just this idea of strict textbook learning, like you have to meet like standardized testing and all this. I think I would love to leave that behind, just because over the years we've seen the track records where it doesn't suit all students. Some kids are just not great test takers, but that does not mean they can't be successful in the classroom. So I would love to leave that behind. And I think, that gives kids anxiety, just to say like, hey, you're getting into college based on test scores. You move on to the next grade based on test scores. Like everything falls on these test scores. I think it kind of hinders kids' performance a little bit. So that's something I would love to leave behind.
And maybe it's rethinking how assessments are done.
Yeah.
To have a variety of, options. Maybe it's that.
Sabrina, I grew up in the Southern Baptist area. I would go amen on what you just said on the world of getting rid of the formal assessment stuff. I think when you look at any area, urban, suburban, rural, if students know there's a career that really piques their interest early on, and it's something they want to do. So let's say cybersecurity or gaming or just anything, just throw that out there. Say we'll stay with cybersecurity. If they know I can get through high school, have a lot of the coursework, maybe some dual credit or dual enrollment taken care of. And then when I get out, I maybe have 16 months to get a tech degree and make good money.
Yes.
That's a motivation, that's a cycle breaker. That's a big deal for rural communities, urban communities, and somewhat in suburban communities. But I just think that's the approach of education. And I think if we can get rid of, and I think Sabrina mentioned the textbook. Are we really going to keep buying textbooks at upper? I mean, do we need to all the time when there's so much digital platform and there's free resources online? We need to adjust and evolve because, and I wanted to pull this up and not pull it up, but I just kind of say something from an article. And one of the things that I thought was pretty cool, and I have a 15-year-old, so I live this world every day. And I'm going to quote this. This is from the article on future of education after COVID. Basically, since students identify themselves today by technology and view access to information as an extension of their identity, that to me it's a major shape in education, right? If that's how they view themselves, then we're going back to a textbook and we're doing paper pencil. I'm not saying it's totally wrong, but what are we doing as a school to shift towards that type of learning? That's my PSA announcement, I guess, for the day.
Yeah.
So.
A great one at that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good one. Everyone, generally knows the advancement of tech and the involvement of tech in our daily lives, but it's really thinking about how that impacts students. And I hadn't heard that quote before, so that was an interesting one. Well, to kind of, wrap things up, could you both share maybe where people could go to learn more about either of your work?
For us, it's you go to our website, nrea.net, or you can find us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff. We do a national conference every year that's around rural education, and it's around really what's hitting our rural areas and our country because we're so divisive. And we pick party lines sometimes, and we're down the middle, and we just want to help. So if you're interested in doing stuff with us, let us know.
And it's the same with us, InnovateEDU's website. Also, I think it'll just lead you down a rabbit hole of wonderful projects. And thank you, Ela, for just having us on your platform today. I would love to join again. I think it's just great, vital information given today.
Thank you. And we'll make sure to link to all the mentioned websites in the description of this video. If you're watching, feel free to check out all those links. But thank you again to our speakers for joining us.